Seven Blue Skies channel brings you a new Dr. Rifat Ismail adventure, Paranormal, Book 4, Part 1, Legend of the Cannibal, by Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq. Introduction. Before I tell my next tale, allow me to introduce myself again. And those of you who have read these instructions several times before, don't be fidgety, because it is necessary for those who don't know me. For those of you who do, I would hate for you to forget me. I am Dr. Rifat Ismail, the Egyptian doctor who is crawling towards 70 years of age, living alone with a mountain of memories that were horrible at first, and then with the passing years became happy notions from the days of my youth. I was lucky in my life to be guided to where every vampire sleeps, or haunted by ghosts, ghouls, and monsters. And how many dangers I have faced, and how many plots I have revealed, and how many secrets I have realized. And here I am, still able to enjoy life and sleep with content. I must grab a pen to write these lines. And now we will go back in time to the year 1965. I was 40 years old when I first met the human flesh-eater, and this was not in an African jungle nor in the Australian desert, but it was right here in the rather classy building in which I live in Douai, Cairo. But why spoil my story before I write even a letter of it? Flip the page and you will understand everything. 1. I suspect. Cairo, December 12, 1964. My dear brother Adil, I have been hesitant before writing this letter, on one hand because I dare not make you think I'm the sort of person who grabs a pen and writes letters like the rest of God's people, and on the other hand because I know you are constantly busy in your work, which would be compounded by this letter and the necessity of a reply, another load upon your already loaded existence. How are you, my friend? And how is your family? Some 5 months ago I returned from a scientific conference in Scotland, and I can almost hear you say, Scotland again, after my prior trip for my doctorate in the University of Dundee. Do you remember Maggie? Do you remember my lame poems, with which I gave you a headache, all in Arabic, of which Maggie wouldn't get a single letter? And our tours on the Corniche in Alexandria, in San Stefano, discussing a dangerous decision, i.e., should I immigrate from Egypt and live there with her forever, or just forget the whole thing? I wanted to marry her. At the same time, I wanted to live in Egypt, but Maggie made that choice impossible. And how many times she tried to convince me to immigrate, but I refused. Do you believe that I met Maggie at Professor James McKillop's, and she was not married yet? A lot of things happened, and we faced a lot of horrible dangers together, which brought our souls even closer. And for the second time I pulled her out of my soul as if trying to extract a perfectly good tooth from the mouth without anesthesia. Anyway, the important thing is that I'm back to my lovely apartment, and I have started renovations. For instance, I have put up wallpaper. I changed some pieces of furniture, and I changed the ordinary lamps with chic neon lights as per the modern style. Except that a sense of the whole thing being trivial disturbs my feelings. Who am I? What am I doing? What is the purpose of my life? I am, as usual, that lone wolf who doesn't have any friends, nor a wife, nor family. They live in their own world in Kafr Badr and don't care much about my problems as long as I don't choose life with them. And it seems that my brother Rida, after the demon caller thing I told you about, has become the go-getter of the family for anything they might have needed from me. I'm not a miserable person to the extent that you may suspect, but I'm definitely not a happy person either. And in trying to erase this boredom that dents my soul, I have started coming to know my neighbors. Do you believe that Rifat, your childhood friend, is actually getting to know his neighbors? Well, believe everything in this strange era, because I'm not the same innocent guy you knew. And in the building where I live, there are 10 apartments, 5 that have residents and 5 that are locked. There is an old police commander. Maybe you know him. His name is Mohammed Halim, who lives as an empty nester with his wife as all of their children have married. And there is a sociology teacher who has a big family. And there is an engineer and his wife and 2 daughters. And another doctor besides myself. In summary, all of the families are totally traditional Egyptian families, kind, friendly, but they will never get me, and not one amongst them could hold an interesting dialogue that refreshes my soul after all the stress I've been through. Only one person I believed had depth, though I didn't know exactly how. He lives on my floor and is a 30-year-old young man, quiet, with sharp looks, and the color of his skin is really weird. He is an officer in the Marines, as the doorman told me. He lives alone, and doesn't befriend or talk to anyone, and he is accustomed to being away from his apartment for months. Maybe he spends it on a ship somewhere at sea. He prepays his rent and leaves some money with the doorman for the power and water bills. I think if I can break the barrier of introversion, maybe I would find something of intelligence and culture in him. I have always learned to respect the silent ones, as I see in them amazing depths. So when they speak, I realize how much of a fool I was. But I'm going to try to get to know this guy. For now, there is no other news to add to my letter, but I look forward to a detailed reply from you that melts the barrier of years and distance. And may God keep you well. Yours loyally, Rifat Ismail. Alexandria, December 20th, 1964. Dear Rifat, I received your letter with happiness because you still remember me after all these years, and I was happier still that you're still alive after all the disasters which haunted you in England, Romania, and even your miserable village. It's apparent from your letter that another disaster had pursued you in Scotland, which convinces me that you are indeed a jinxed person. Even if you don't look for trouble, trouble is bound to look for you. And now, listen to my words, Rifat. Stop moving around, because everyone's opinion is that doing so exposes you to more danger. Why don't you stop playing the role of the fly who constantly buzzes? Why don't you have patience like others? Why don't you get married? Your problem is one of being too brutally honest and too vain, because your brain thinks you're smarter to live through other people's lives. Listen to my advice and try to stay home and, get to know your nice neighbors. Buy a television set like me. It's an amazing miracle. In front of it, Siham and I and our son Ashraf sit watching the whole world while being safe at home. I am in good health, thanks to God, but what bothers me here is the issue we are facing in the police department, which is a weird chain of heinous crimes. But I won't tell you so that it doesn't disturb your sleep. But there is one thing I can tell you. Every night, while shaking, I ask God to keep our kids and loved ones safe from these awful things. I imagine you know nothing of the subject, firstly because you're in Cairo, and because we have kept the story from the press so as not to scare the public. I'm very busy right now, so please excuse me for ending my letter. I await many long, entertaining letters from you before you forget our friendship. Your brother, Adil Tawfiq. Cairo, December 24th, 1964. My brother Adil. I wonder, how is the weather there in Alex? Here there are thunderstorms with much wind and rain. It doesn't stop, and the cold nearly penetrates the bones and freezes the marrow. I sit now in a bed under heavy blankets, and the room's temperature is warm, suffocating, loaded with kerosene because of the damned heater you gave me as a gift 6 years ago. And what a gift! I'm sipping on a cup of hot tea and smoking heavily, as if all the fumes are not suffocating enough already. I read your letter and said to myself, hey, here's a childhood friend who reached the rank of a police sergeant and no longer has enough time to write a respectable letter to the likes of me. And then I told myself that this man is busy and has a family and a TV set, which makes those lines he sent very much appreciated. As for me, I have nothing to busy me except for my attempt at becoming friendly with my neighbors, especially that guy I told you about. This guy is really weird. More than once he went into his apartment, which is directly across from mine, and turned on the living room lights, yet if I knock on his door, he won't open to me. You would say he's trying to avoid me due to a personal dislike of my character. But how would he know I am the one knocking? And every night at midnight I hear the sound of the lock on his apartment door opening and the sound of footsteps on the stairs. So where does he go at this time? And why doesn't he turn off his apartment lights since he is going out? I'm watching that kid, and I have found a target that fulfills some of my life's wishes, and I'm covering the mystery of his personal life and will not keep it a secret from you. I have a vague feeling that this kid is watching me closely. About a week ago, he asked the doorman about me, and that idiot told him practically everything about me and my previous inquiries on him as well. And since then, more than once I have seen him staring at me with interest. The strangest thing about this kid is his garbage bin beside his apartment door. I'm not curious by nature, but when you find a bin full of used train tickets, all of them to and from Alexandria, you have to be surprised. This guy traveled multiple times to Alexandria last year, and I don't understand why he doesn't get a season ticket for the train, to save money, or travel with his blue Chevrolet, which I have only seen him use twice. But I have taken too long on this issue, something that may not interest you, so forgive my blabbering. My greetings to everyone, with no exception. Your brother, Rifat Ismail. Alexandria, December 27th, 1964. Dear Rifat, who said that topic doesn't interest me? My security sense is on the move, and you have actually succeeded in activating my curiosity. And it seems like you wanted to do so without hiding anything. This neighbor is hiding a secret, and this secret can't be something legal, because I can smell such things from afar, and I'll bet you on it. Watch out from this individual. In your story, there are a lot of things about him that don't sit well with me, and I suspect. 2. The Visit. Cairo, January 1st, 1965. My dear brother Adil, I write to you this letter in the first days of the year 1965, hoping from God to make it a happy one for you and your family, and for a higher rank, like detective, to be added to my list of friends soon. You finished your last letter with a word that is suitable to an experienced cop, which is, I suspect. And by my life, you have reminded me of the immortal word of Émile Zola, I accuse, in his famous series of articles about which you have probably forgotten everything. I received your letter on New Year's Eve. I was alone, as usual, sitting on my bed surrounded by loads of medical textbooks and, next to me, that damned heater and the teacup in my hand, and on top of me a disconcerting number of blankets. But I was shaking, and the tears threatened to spring from my eyes because there was no human who cared about me or told me Happy New Year. Just another night and another year added to my 40 years. On the radio, Abdul Wahab is singing some song, and there is a note from Edinburgh carrying Maggie's signature, wishing me a Happy New Year and telling me she is engaged. And I don't blame her for anything, because I wasn't doing anything to keep her, and events took their natural course, everything as expected. But what is the secret of this pain in my throat? And Abdul Wahab still singing? And here the doorbell rang. I fidgeted and felt annoyed to leave my bed in this cold after it had become warm like my mother's hug. This was inhumane. I threw a swear word and waited for a second knock which would make opening the door inescapable. But it didn't come. It was midquarter midnight, and I wasn't expecting anyone to ring the doorbell at this hour unless it were something important. In addition, whoever rings the bell for something important would ring several times in quick succession, and not show this exaggerated patience. These contradictions aroused my suspicion. So I moved the covers, put on my robe and slippers, and passed through the dark living room to the door, opening it carefully after turning on the light. The staircase was dark, but the light of the lamp succeeded in allaying the darkness to some extent. And in the dim light, my neighbor, that young man, stood wearing a chic coat. He seemed embarrassed, with water dripping from his hair, shoulders, coat, and nose. "Good evening. Beg your pardon," he said in a calm, deep voice. "Good evening." He cleared his throat with some difficulty and then whispered, "I've just returned home. I was about to eat my dinner and, could I borrow some spices from you? I'm simply starving." Spices? At midnight? One of us must be crazy. I don't think Magellan, who sailed around the world looking for spices, would have dared to wake his neighbor at this hour for some. What would you do in my place? Of course, you would have scolded him and shut the door in the kid's face, or broke his teeth, or maybe you would shoot him without discussion. But I'm not like others, and you know that. I can't really get angry at anything. Plus, his polite manners made it impossible for me to treat him badly. Besides, I had not yet slept, and he had offered on a silver platter my chance to get to know him. So would I refuse? I asked him to come in while I retrieved what he wanted, and so he did. I sat him in the living room, and he smelled of wetness and cold from his coat and hair and everything. He lifted up weary eyes to the walls and ceiling and said, "Your home shows good taste." and I thanked him for the compliment. Then, while playing with a battery I had forgotten on the table, he said, "The owner of these magical touches must be your wife." So I explained the truth to him, although I was sure he already knew I'm not married. "So you live alone?" he asked. I almost answered in the affirmative, but some hidden reason had often led me to making the worst and wisest decisions in my life. That feeling compelled me to lie, and I answered, "A friend lives with me. He'll be back soon." He smiled politely, saying, "Ah, the bachelor life." I smiled and left him, going into the kitchen. I opened a wooden cabinet and began putting some pepper, chili powder, and other spices in a torn newspaper page. "So, you hate washing dishes like me." And here I was startled. He was standing right behind me, staring at the piles of week old dishes in the kitchen sink. When did he come in? How did I not hear his steps? And what rudeness pushed him to walk about freely in a place he doesn't know, as if my bachelorhood gave him direct permission to move around in my home as he pleased? Should I kick him out? In reality, I felt that the right moment for this hadn't come yet, and that, until now, he didn't commit a real punishable crime. He just lacks manners, that's all it is. I wrapped up the spices I had chosen for him in the small piece of paper and said to him, "I didn't catch your name yet?" "Azet. My name is Azet Sharif." And he pushed his thumb into the paper, pulled it out covered in pepper, and licked it, saying, "I'm a merchant marines officer, and I live here alone." His features were clear in front of me, as best as could be, and he seemed somewhat handsome to me, but his sharp-looking eyes were annoying, and his firm, slim lips which gave the impression of unusual cruelty. And then there's his skin color, which is a mixture of gray and icterus, and the dark circles under his eyes, and his being overly thin. All of that reminded me of the dusky look with which doctors describe patients with chronic kidney failure. As for his hands, they were veiny, so rough, and it surprised me that a human whose work is writing and not manual labor would have such hands. Anyway, I confessed that his presence was uncomfortable, and I had started feeling as if the friendship would not work out, and that I wanted to get rid of him quickly, except that, out of politeness, I opened the cabinet and took 2 pieces of cake which I had saved to celebrate the New Year alone. But I didn't feel any appetite for them. I put the 2 pieces on a plate with a fork and handed it to him, mumbling, "Happy New Year. This is my small celebration of the year." He tried to refuse, but I insisted, and he seemed forced more than was called for. And here something strange happened. As soon as he put a bite of the cake in his mouth, his features seemed to shrink and turn to disgust, and while spasming, he gestured to his full mouth, which I understood, and so led him quickly to the bathroom while he held his mouth shut with his hands, with a feverish, throaty sound. And from behind the door I heard him vomiting. This was strange. I didn't think the cake was so bad, nor that it had spoiled so quickly in this cold weather. I tasted a leftover piece of the cake and found it excellent. And here he came back swaying from the bathroom, and his face had become more yellow. Noticing that I had tasted the cake, he said, "Excuse me, my stomach, it can't handle candy or sweets." "Then how will it handle all these spices?" He replied, "This is a conditional reflex. It's just distaste, nothing more. And now, I thank you, and sorry to bother you." And he closed the paper of spices I had made for him, and then walked swaying to my apartment door, bowed his head in greeting, and left. What a visit. Anyway, I still think he has depth, for the words conditional reflex are unusual from a layperson unless he has at least a vague background in physiology, psychology, or both. Plus, he's too steady and calm, without a doubt. And now, do you still doubt this hater of sweets? My greetings, and please write to me again quickly. Your brother, Rifat Ismail. End of Part 1.